hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that, for your sake. Oh, I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, well, sentiment is my forte. For life.
Yes, sir.
Oh, speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Oh, and by the way, Lane, I see from your books that on last Thursday evening, when Lord Shoreman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I have often observed in married households the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens. Is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I have had very little experience with it myself up to the present. I have only been married once. That was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know, as I'm much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir. It is not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. That will do, then. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax, really. If the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you to town? Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Elsie. I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
Who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbours, neighbours.
Got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire?
Oh, perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire? Oh, yes, of course. Hello, why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who is coming to tea?
Merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
How perfectly delightful.
Oh yes, it's all very well. However, I'm afraid that Aunt Augusta would quite approve of your being here.
Well, may I ask why?
Oh, my dear fellow, the way that you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It's almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you said you'd come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
But there is nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. And the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If ever I get married, I shall certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that, dear Algie. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
Oh, there's no use speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Please, don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. I ordered them specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you are eating them all the time.
It's quite a different matter. She's my aunt. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter are for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
Very good bread and butter it is too.
My dear fellow, you need not eat as if you were going to eat at all. You behave as if you were married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
In the first place, girls never marry the men that they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It is a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors that one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin. Before I clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? I don't know anyone of the name of Cecily.
Bring me that cigarette case that Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room last time we dined. Yeah, yes,
Do you mean to say that you have had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you would let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
There is no good offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
I think that's rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. Oh, however, no matter. Well, now that I look at the inscription inside, I find that the thing is not yours after all.
Well, of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, this is absurd to make a hard and fast rule about what one should read and one shouldn't. Why, more than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I am quite aware of that fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one should talk of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily. And you said you don't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Oh, yes, a charming old lady she is too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algie.
Yes, but why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt that lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. That's a matter that surely an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself. Oh, for heaven's sake, just give me back my cigarette case.
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her uncle? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to her Uncle Jack? Well, there is no objection. I admit to an aunt being a small aunt, but why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle? I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It's Ernest.
It isn't Ernest, it's Jack.
But I've already introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my life. It is perfectly absurd you're saying your name isn't Ernest. It's on your card. Here's one now. Mr. Ernest Worthing, before the Albany. I will keep this as a proof.
Well, my name is Ernest in town and Jack in the country, and the cigarette case was given me in the country.
Yes. Oh, but that does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Come, old boy. You'd much better have the whole thing out at once.
My dear Algie, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Well, that's exactly what dentists always do. Now, come on. Tell me the whole thing. And may I mention, I have always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by Bunburyist?
I will reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to inform me as to why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now, produce your explanation, and pray, make it improbable.
My dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle, from motives of respect you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited. I may tell you candidly the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected as much, my dear fellow. I have Bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. But go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear Algie, I don't know whether you'll be able to understand my real motives. You're hardly serious enough. When one is placed in position of guardian, one must adopt a very high middle tone in all subjects. It is one's duty to do so. And seeing as a high middle tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or one's happiness, in order to get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother of the name of Ernest who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algie, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either. What you really are is a Bunburyist.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Ernest, so that you may be able to come up to town whenever you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury, so that I may be able to go down to the country whenever I choose. Well, Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it weren't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight at Willis's, for I've really been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
Well, I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You are absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It is very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving an invitation.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. I know perfectly well whom she will place me next to tonight. She'll place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Indeed, it's not even decent. And that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It is simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you be a confirmed Bunburyist, naturally I want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
I am not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother.
Oh.
Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. It is rather a bore. So I'm going to get rid of Ernest, and I strongly advise you to do the same with Mr.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if ever you get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you shall be very glad to know Bunbury. For the man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
Oh, that is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolen, and she's the only girl I ever saw in my life that I would marry, I certainly wouldn't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. What you don't seem to realize is that in married life, 3 is company, 2 is none.
That, my dear young friend, is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and the happy English home has proved in half the time.
Oh, for heaven's sake, don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
It isn't easy to be anything nowadays, my dear fellow. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. Must not sir. Only relative creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. If I can get her out of the way for, say, 10 minutes, so that you might have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolen. May I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
Oh, I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It is just so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart. Am I not? Mr. Worthing.
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I am not that. It would leave no room for development. And I intend to develop in many directions.
I am sorry if we are a little late, Algernon, but I'm obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I haven't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now, I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come over and sit here, Gwendolen?
Thanks, Ma. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Lady! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially for Aunt Augusta.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir. Went down twice.
No cucumber?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
That's great. Thank you, sir. I am greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers, not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from Greek.
It certainly has changed its color. For what cause I, of course, cannot say. Thank you. I have quite a treat for you, Algernon. I'm going to send you down to dinner tonight with Merriman. She is such a nice young woman, so attentive to her husband. It's a delight to watch them.
I'm afraid, Oscar, that I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you this evening after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would be forced to dine upstairs. Well, fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment to me. But the fact is, I have just had a telegram from my poor friend Bunbury to say that he is very ill again. They seem to think that I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of this modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to your uncle, but he never seems to take any notice as far as any improvement in his ailment goes. Well, of course, Algernon, if you are obliged to be by the bedside of Mr. Bunbury, I have nothing more to say. But I would be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception. And one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everyone has practically said whatever they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I shall speak with Mr. Bunbury, Aunt Augusta. You know, he is still conscious. And I think that I can promise you that he will be all right by Saturday. Now, of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen. If one plays bad music,
People don't talk.
But I'll run over the whole program I've drawn out if you will kindly follow me to the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It's very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful. After a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think that they are improper and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed, I believe is so. Here. Gwendolen, you will accompany her.
Certainly, Mamma.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain they mean something else, and that makes me so nervous.
Well, I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I'm never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I have ever met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of the fact. And I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines, and has reached the provincial pulpits, I am told. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Ernest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me he had been called Ernest. I knew I was destined to love you.
Gwendolen, do you really love me?
Passionately.
Oh, darling! You don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Ernest.
But you don't really mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest?
But your name is Ernest.
Oh, yes, I know it is. But supposing it was something else, do you mean to say that you couldn't love me then?
Ah, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation. And like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life, as we know them.
Well, personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't much care about the name of Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It's a divine name. It has music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolen, I must say that I think there are lots of other much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, a charming name.
Jack? No. There is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I've known several Jacks, and they were all, without exception, more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. Or she would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolen, I must get christened at once. Eileen, we must get married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. You know that I love you. And you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you were not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you. But you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolen!
Yes? Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
Well, you know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolen, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you have been about it. I am afraid you have had very little experience in how to propose.
My old one, I've never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They are quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing! Rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing is not quite finished yet.
Finish what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me. You are not engaged to anyone! When you do become engaged to someone, I, or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise. Pleasant, or unpleasant, as the case may be. It is hardly a matter that she could be allowed to arrange for herself. And now, I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. And while I am making these enquiries, you, Gwendolen, will wait for me below in the carriage. Mamma. In the carriage, Gwendolen! Surname Worthing.
Yes.
I think Worthing with a hyphen would be better.
Worthing?
I have known a hyphen produce a wonderful social effect when judiciously used. However, that point can stand over for the present. I feel bound to inform you, Mr. Worthing, you're not down on my list of eligible young men. Although I have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I am quite ready to enter your name should your answers be what a rarely affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. I have always been of opinion that a man who desires to get married should either know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I'm pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England in any case, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes, probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What, between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That is all that can be said about land.
Well, I have a country house with some land, of course, attached to it, about 1,500 acres, I believe, but I don't depend on that for my real income.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterward. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature, like Gwendolen, could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
I own a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to Lady Bloxham. Of course, I can get it back whenever I like. It's 6 months' notice.
Lady, Bloxham? I don't know her.
Oh, she goes about very little. She's a lady considerably advanced in years.
Nowadays, that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that could easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the size?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
Well, I am afraid I really have none. I am a liberal unionist.
Oh, they count as Tories. They dine with us. Or come in the evening at any rate. And now, to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
Both? To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, might be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
Well, I'm afraid I really don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost my parents. It would be near the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found. The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman, a very charitable and kind disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
And where did this charitable gentleman who had the first-class ticket to the seaside resort find you?
In a handbag. Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was in a handbag, a somewhat large black leather handbag with handles to it, an ordinary handbag, in fact.
this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
Cloakroom at Victoria Station.
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial! Mr. Worthing, I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that reminds one of the last excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. Yes, to the particular locality in which the handbag was found. A cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion. It's probably indeed been used for that purpose before now. But it could hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognized position in good society.
Well, may I ask you then what you would advise me to do? I need hardly say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolen's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce, at any rate, one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It is in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You can hardly imagine, sir, that I and Lord Bracknell would ever dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning.
Oh, for goodness sakes, don't play that gossipy tune, Algie. Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to tell me that Gwendolen refused you?
Oh, Gwendolen is as right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. I never met such a gorgon. Well, I don't really know what a gorgon is like, but I'm quite sure that Lady Bracknell is one. Well, at any rate, she is a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. Oh, I beg your pardon, Algie. I suppose I shouldn't talk about your own aunt in that way before you.
Oh, my dear fellow, I love hearing relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all.
Well, I haven't got any relations. I don't know the first thing about relations.
You are a lucky fellow. Relations never lend one any money, nor give one any credit, even for genius. They're a sort of aggravated form of the public.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I won't argue about the matter. You always want to argue about things.
That is exactly what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that I'd shoot myself. You don't think there's any chance of Gwendolen becoming like her mother at 150 years, do you, Andrew?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That's his.
Is that clever?
It's perfectly phrased.
I am sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. The thing has become an absolute public nuisance.
Have you told Gwendolen the truth yet about your being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl. What extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
The way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty, and to someone else if she is plain.
Oh, that is nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the profligate hereditary, my dear fellow. The sort of thing that runs in families. You would much better say a severe chill.
You are sure a severe chill is not hereditary or anything of the kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well then. My poor brother Ernest is carried off suddenly and fast by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
Yes, but didn't you say that Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest? Won't she feel his loss a good deal?
Oh, that's all right. Cecily is not a silly romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She has a capital appetite, goes long walks, and pays no attention at all to her lessons.
I would rather like to see Cecily.
I will take very good care you never do. She is excessively pretty, and she is only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolen yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
Oh, one doesn't blurt these things out to people. Gwendolen and Cecily are perfectly certain to become extremely great friends. I'll bet you anything you like, a half an hour after they've met, they'll be calling each other sister.
Women only do that after they've called each other a lot of other things. Now, if we are going to a good table at Willis's, we really must go and dress. You know it's nearly 7.
Oh, it always is nearly 7.
Well,
I never knew you when you were.
Miss Fairfax.
upon my word.
Now, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular I want to say, Mr. Worthing. As it is somewhat of a private matter, you will, of course, listen.
Gwendolen, darling.
Ernest,
We may never be married.
from the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we shall. A few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I ever had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing that she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear Gwendolen.
The story of your romantic, as related to me by Mamma, with unpleasing comments, has naturally set the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination, and the simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. The town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
My own one.
How long do you remain out?
Till Monday.
Good. Algie, you may turn round now.
I've turned around already, thanks.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you up to your carriage, my own darling.
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going Bunbury.
Yes, sir.
I probably won't be back till Monday, so you can put up my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you're a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
Thank you, Lane.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
That sensible, intellectual girl, the girl I can't go in my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh. I'm just a little anxious about poor Bunbury.
If you don't take care, your friend Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They are the only things that are never serious.
Oh, that is nonsense. Elsie, you never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Cecily? Cecily?
Cecily.
Surely such a utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is rather Milton's duty than yours. Especially at a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. Well, it isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well it'll quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is, that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he is leaving for town.
Uncle Jack is so serious. Sometimes he is so serious, I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanour is especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one with a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
Oh, I suppose that's why he always looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
Oh, I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. Well, we might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I am sure you certainly would.
I do not think that even I could produce any effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I'm not sure I would desire to reclaim him. I'm not in favour of this modern mania of turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so let him reap.
But men don't sow, and if they did, I don't see why they should be punished for it. There is far too much punishment in the world as it is. German is certainly a punishment. And there is far too much German in the world. Well, you told me yourself Germany was overpopulated.
That is no reason you should be writing in your diary, Cecily. I really don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that haven't happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that the library keeps sending us.
Do not speak slightingly, the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Oh, did you really, Miss Prism? Oh, how wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily, and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
Well, I suppose so. But it seems very unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript, unfortunately, was abandoned. I used the word in the sense of missed or mislaid. To your work, child, these speculations are profitless. German grammar, gender.
Oh, but I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up to the garden.
Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
How are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well?
Oh, Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. Oh, I think it would do her so much good to take a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Certainly. I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
Oh, I know, Miss Prism. But I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that, and not about my German lesson when the rector first appeared.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Yes. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from tailgate.
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Oh, yes. He usually likes to spend his Sunday in London, yes. He is not one of those who so late his enjoyment, as by all accounts, that unfortunate young man his brother seems to be. But I must not disturb a cheery and a pupil any longer.
My name is Letitia Dalcock.
A classical allusion, merely, drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I thank you, Doctor. I will have a stroll with you. I would find I have a headache after all. A walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful.
Oh.
Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee, you may admit, it is somewhat too sensational. Melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy! Horrid geography! Horrid! Horrid! German!
Mr. Ernest Worthing's just driven over from the station. He's brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, BWW, Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very disappointed. I told him you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he was very anxious to speak with you.
Kindly ask Mr. Worthing to come here. I suppose you talked to one of the housekeepers about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I have never met a really wicked person before. Oh, I feel rather frightened. I am so afraid. You look just like everyone else.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
Under some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I believe I'm more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. And you, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother. My cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
You mustn't think that I'm a wicked cousin Cecily. I'm not really wicked at all.
Well, if you're not, then you certainly have been deceiving us all in a most inexcusable manner. I hope you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked, and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Well, I suppose I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I have been very bad. In my own small way.
I don't think you should be as proud as all that, though I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you, cousin Cecily.
I can't understand how you all come to be here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
Oh, that is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go up by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment I'm anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Oh. Well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But still, I think you'd better wait for Uncle Jack to arrive. I know he wants to speak to you about your immigrating.
About my what?
Your immigrating. He's gone up to buy your outfit.
I most certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. He's got no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you'll require neckties. He is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you'd have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, well. The accounts I have received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I would like you to reform me, cousin Cecily. You might make that your mission, if you don't mind.
I'm afraid I have no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
Well, it is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. Woo! I feel better already.
Well, you're looking a little worse.
Oh, that's because I'm hungry.
Oh, how thoughtless of me. Oh, I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Oh, Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite until I've had a buttonhole first.
A Marshall here?
No.
I'd sooner a pink rose. What? Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily. I don't think it can be quite right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism must have a side. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
A snare that every sensible man should like to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I should like to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him.
Oh, you're too much alone, dear Dr. George. You should get married. A misanthrope, I can understand. A woman-thrope, never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lost it up to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Literally more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive, except to his wife.
Often I have been told, not even to her.
That depends upon the intellectual sympathies of a woman. Maturity can always be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. Oh, but where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
No!
Mr. Worthing!
Indeed, if I not be told young women.
I have returned to I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust the scope of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother!
More shameful debts and extravagance?
Still leading his life of pleasure.
Dead!
Oh, dead? Your brother Ernest dead?
Quite dead!
What a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence.
Poor Ernest! He had many faults, but it is a sad, sad road.
Very sad. He was with him at the end.
No, he died abroad in Paris. In fact, I had a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man says, so let him be.
Charity, dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am peculiarly susceptible to drafts. Will the candidates here?
No, he seemed to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris. I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last. You would no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the man in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion, yes. Joyful, or as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebration, and at christenings and confirmation, and on days of humiliation, and on festal days.
Oh, that reminds me. You mentioned christenings, I think, Dr. Chasuble. I said looking about the christen, all right. Well, I mean, you are continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties at this parish. I've often spoken to the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there a particular infant in whom you're interested in, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes. People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child, dear Doctor. No, I am particularly fond of children. The fact is, I would like to be christened myself this afternoon if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you've been christened already.
Well, I don't remember anything about it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
Well, I certainly intend to have. Of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way, or if you think I'm a little too old.
Oh, no. I am by no means a bigoted Paedo-Baptist. No. The sprinkling, as indeed the immersion of adults, was a common practice of the primitive church.
Immersion?
You need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that's necessary, or indeed I think advisable. Our weather is so changeable. Would you wish the ceremony to be performed?
Oh, I might trot around about 5 if that would suit you.
Oh, perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform at the time. A case of twins that occurred recently.
Oh, I don't see much fun in being christened along with other babies. It would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Oh, admirably. And now, Mr. Worthing, I will no longer intrude into a house of sorrow. I would merely beg you not to be too much bowed down by grief, which seems to us as bitter trials are often blessings in disguise. Yes. Seems to me to be a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I'm so pleased to see you back. Oh, but what horrid clothes you've got on. Do go and change them.
My child!
What's the matter, Uncle Jack? Oh, do look happy. You look as if you had toothache. And I've got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother! Who? Your brother, Ernest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
Well, what nonsense! I have got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out. And you will shake hands with him, won't you, Jack?
These are very joyful times.
After we had all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems peculiar in his person.
My brother in the dining room? I don't know what it all means. I think it's perfectly absurd. Good heavens!
Hello, brother-in-law. I have come down from town to tell you that I am terribly sorry for all the trouble that I have given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you're not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think he's coming down here disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit.
Bunbury? I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or about anything else.
Of course I admit that the faults are all on my side. But I must say, I find Brother John's coldness to me peculiarly painful. I'd expected a more enthusiastic welcome.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with your brother, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me. Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
It's pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we might leave the 2 brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful action today, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can only stay for a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Ernest has been suddenly called back to town.
Yes. What a fearful lie you are, Jack. I've not been called back to town at all.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You're not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clowns.
You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth have you got me changed?
It is perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who is actually staying with you for a whole week as a guest in your house. I would protest.
You are certainly not staying with me for a whole week as a guest or anything else. You have got to leave by the 4:05 train.
I most certainly will not leave you so long as you are in mourning. I would think very unfriendly. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. I would think it very unkind if you didn't.
Well, will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes. If you're not too long about it. I've never known anyone to take so long to dress and with such little results.
Well, at any rate, that is better than always being overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by being immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous. Your conduct is outrage, and your presence in my garden utterly absurd. However, you have got to catch the 4:05, and I hope you'll have a pleasant journey back to town. This Bunbury, as you call it, has been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything. But I must see her again and make arrangements for another Bunbury. Oh, there she is.
I made it come back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Oh, then have we got to part?
I'm afraid so. May I not see you again before I go?
Miss Prism and I will be doing lessons here after lunch.
Can't you invent something to get Miss Prism out of the way?
Do you mean invent a falsehood?
No, simply something that isn't quite true, but should be.
Nothing would induce me to deceive Miss Prism in the smallest detail. However, if you happen to mention that dear Dr. Chasuble was waiting somewhere to see Miss Prism, she would certainly go to meet him.
What a capital suggestion.
I didn't suggest anything, Cousin Alice. I merely pointed out that if you followed a certain line of conduct, a certain result would follow.
Of course. Then I shall meet you here at 3:30.
Cecily, don't you think that you had better return to Miss Prism?
Yes, Uncle Jack. Goodbye, Cousin Ernest. I'm afraid I shan't see you again, as I shall be doing my lessons with Miss Prism. In the garden.
Bye, Cousin Cecily. Oh, Jack, your tie is all wrong.
Now look, Hal, Algie, you've got to go. Bunbury is extremely ill, and your place is by his side.
I'm afraid I cannot leave at the present moment. I must first have my second lunch.
Second lunch? What nonsense! You can't lunch twice.
But I am fearfully hungry. And you'll be very glad to know that Bunbury is very much better.
Oh, Algie, you're perfectly maddening.
I'll be all right if you let me have some lunch.
Well, I have ordered your things to be packed and the dog cart to come around. No second lunch!
Merriman!
Cecily, you are again making entries in your diary.
I am merely, as I always do, taking you for my example, Miss Prism.
When one has thoroughly mastered the principles of bimetallism, one has the right to lead an introspective life. Hardly before. Mr. Worthing, I may say I was in hopes that you had returned to town.
My departure will not be long delayed. However, Miss Prism, I feel it is only my duty to tell you that Dr. Chasuble is waiting for you in the vestry.
In the vestry? That sounds serious. I do not think it would be right to keep him waiting, Cecily.
It would be very, very wrong.
Mr. Worthing, we shall probably not meet again. Do not forget, there is always hope, even for the most depraved. Cecily? Let me entreat of you not to be led away by whatever superficial qualities this unfortunate man possesses.
Oh, believe me, dear Miss Prism, it is only the superficial qualities that last. Man's deeper nature soon found out.
Do not be idle, Cecily.
This parting, Mr. Cardew, is very painful.
Oh, it's always painful to part from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity, but even the momentary separation from anyone to whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
I hope, Cecily, that I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the visual personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you will allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? I'd give anything to have a look at it, may I?
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it is in volume form, I hope you'll order a copy.
Yes.
But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on, I'm quite ready for more. Oh, don't cough, Ernest. I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily. Ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you. Wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should tell me that you love me. Wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Let's come around next week at the same hour.
Yes, Well, Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying on until next week at the same hour.
I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anyone in the whole world but you. I love you. I want you. I cannot live without you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy. Of course. Why, we've been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months.
Yes, now that time has flown. It will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you of course have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, Ernest, but I fell in love with you.
Darling. But when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the situation one way or the other.
after a long struggle with myself, I accepted. Under this dear old tree. The next day, I bought this little ring in your name. And this is the bangle with the true lover's knots I promised you always to wear. Did I give you this?
Very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've given for your leading such a bad life. And this is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
My letters? But my dear sweet Cecily, I have never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote always 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Oh, Cecily, do let me read them.
Oh, no! I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited. The 3 that you wrote me after I'd broken off the engagement are so beautiful and so badly spelled that even now I can hardly read them without crying.
But was our engagement ever broken off?
Well, of course it was. On the 22nd of March. You can see the entry if you like.
Yes.
Today, I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But why on earth did you break it off? What have I done? I had done nothing at all. I am very much hurt indeed, Cecily, that you broke it off. Particularly when the weather was so charming.
Well, it hardly would have been a really serious engagement if it had been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
Cecily, you are a perfect angel.
Oh, you dear, sweet, romantic boy. I hope your hair goes naturally, does it?
Yes, darling. But with a little help from others. Cecily, you will never break off our engagement again, will you?
Oh, I don't think I could, now that I've actually met you. Besides, of course, there is the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You mustn't laugh at me, darling, but it has always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone of the name of Ernest. There is something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence.
But my dear sweet Cecily, do you mean to say that you couldn't love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Oh, well, the name you like. Let's see now. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name Algernon.
But my dear sweet darling, little Cecily, I don't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It's not a bad name after all. In fact, it's a rather aristocratic name. Why, half the chaps who get into the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name was Algie, wouldn't you love me?
I might respect you. I might admire your moral character, but I fear I couldn't possibly give you my undivided attention.
Your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in the rites and ceremonials of the church.
Oh yes, Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him immediately on a most important christening. Hey, most important business. I shan't be away more than a half an hour.
Well, considering that we've been engaged since February the 14th, and now we only met today for the very first time, I think it's rather hard. Believe me, so long a period is half an hour. Don't you make it 20 minutes?
be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy. Oh, I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal in my diary.
Miss Fairfax has just called to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Kindly ask the good lady to come here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. Oh, and you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax. I suppose one of the many good elderly women who are associated with Uncle Jack in some of his philanthropic work in London. I don't quite like women who are interested in philanthropic work. I think it is so flawed.
Miss Fairfax.
Allow me to introduce myself. Oh, my name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew. What a very sweet name. Something tells me we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
Well, how nice of you to like me so much after we've known each other such a comparatively short time. Pray, sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolen, won't you?
If you wish.
Then that is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favorable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Papa, I suppose.
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I am glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man. And certainly, once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate, does he not? And I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily. Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It is part of her system. So do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolen. I am very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh, no. I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also.
Oh, no. I have no mother, nor, in fact, any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes. I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh, it is strange. He never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I am not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I am very fond of you, Cecily. I have liked you ever since I met you. But I am bound to state that now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish you were, well, just a little older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly.
Oh, pray do. I think whenever one has anything unpleasant to say, one should be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honor. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the influence of the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history, supplies us with many most painful examples of what I refer to. If it were not so, indeed, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon. Gwendolen, did you say Ernest?
Yes?
Oh, but it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm afraid they have not been on good terms for a very long time.
Ah, that accounts for it. And now that I think of it, I have never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian.
Quite sure. In fact, I am going to be his.
I beg your pardon.
Dearest Gwendolen, there is no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily. I think there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
I'm afraid you must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read in the paper. I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid I have a prior claim.
This would distress me more than I can tell you, dearest Gwendolen, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a fair in the hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have got himself into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On the occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you! This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is obvious our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay tea here as usual, miss?
Oh, yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
Oh, I suppose that's why you live in town.
Quite a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London. Would you like some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. A cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays.
Kindly hand that to Miss Fairfax.
You have loaded my tea with lumps of sugar. Though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature. But I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt you were false and deceitful. I had never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It appears to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood.
Ernest, my own Ernest.
Gwendolen, darling.
A moment, please. May I ask if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
You dear little Cecily, of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you.
You may. Well, I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present round your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon.
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack.
Here is Ernest.
My own love.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To what young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolen.
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolen. I mean, to Gwendolen.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there must be some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrieff.
Algernon Moncrieff? Are you really called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But my name certainly is John. It has been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
Oh, my sweet wronged Gwendolen.
You will call me sister, will you not?
There's just one question I should like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I'd like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolen, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life that I've ever been reduced to such a painful position, and I am really quite inexperienced in doing anything of the kind. However, I will tell you quite frankly that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all. I never had a brother in my life, and I have not the smallest intention of ever having a brother in the future.
No brother at all?
No.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
Not even of any kind.
I am afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
Well, it isn't a very pleasant position for a young girl to suddenly find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call bumbling, I suppose?
Yes, and a perfectly wonderful Bunbury. He's the most wonderful Bunbury I've ever had in my life.
Well, you have no right whatsoever to Bunbury here.
That is absurd. One has the right to Bunbury anywhere one chooses. Any serious Bunburys knows that.
Oh, serious Bunburys, good heavens. Well, the only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down the country quite as often as you used to do, dear Algie, and a very good thing, too.
Your brother is a little off colour, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was, and not a bad thing either.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolen, that is all. I love her.
I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
There is certainly no chance in your marrying Miss Cardew.
I don't think there is much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax ever being united.
Well, that is no business of yours.
If it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It is very vulgar to talk of one's business.
How you can sit there, calmly eating muffins when we're in this horrible trouble, I cannot make out. You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. One must always eat muffins quite calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
Well, I say it's perfectly heartless of you eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I'm in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I'm in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. At the present moment, I am eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, I am particularly fond of muffins.
Well, that is no reason why you should eat them all in that greedy way. I wish that you would have some tea, and you would like chicken. Oh, the man eats his own muffins in his own garden. But you said it was perfectly heartless with muffins. I said it was perfectly heartless of you under those circumstances. It's a very different thing.
That may be, but the muffin or the shake.
Oh dear, I wish to goodness that you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner first. That is absurd. I never go without having my dinner first. Nobody ever does. Oh, except vegetarians, people like that. Besides, I have just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45, under the name of Ernest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I made arrangements this morning with Dr. Chasuble myself to be christened at 5:30, and I will naturally the name of Ernest. Gwendolen would wish it. We can't both be christened Ernest, it's absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There's no evidence at all that I've ever been christened by anyone. It's entirely different in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I haven't been christened in years.
Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite so. So I know that my constitution can stand it. But if you're not quite sure about your ever having been christened, I think it's very dangerous you're venturing upon it now. You might become very unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected with you was very nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe
Well, yes, but you said yourself that a severe illness was not hereditary.
It used to be, I dare say, but it is now. Science is always making the most wonderful improvements in years.
Anything but nonsense.
Jack! You're at the muffins again. I really wish you wouldn't. There are only two left. I told you I was particularly fond of muffins.
But I hate tea cake.
Why on earth, then, do you allow tea cake to be served up for your guests? What ideas you have of hospitality.
Algernon, I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
Well, I haven't quite finished my tea yet. And there is still one muffin left.
The fact that they did not follow us at once into the house, as anyone else would have done, seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame, lad.
Well, they have been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you call?
But I haven't got a cough.
Looking at us. What effrontery.
They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It's the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
We will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, I have something very particular to ask you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolen, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrieff, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
So that I might have an opportunity of meeting you?
That certainly seems a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
Oh, I don't. But that does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have an opportunity of coming up to town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. This is not the moment for German skepticism. Their explanations appear to be quite satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to me to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I am more than content with what Mr. Moncrieff said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Yes, I mean no.
True. I had almost forgotten. There are principles at stake one cannot surrender. Which I should tell them. The task is not a pleasant one.
Couldn't we both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. Will you take the time for me?
Certainly. Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier.
That is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all? But we're going to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake, you are prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am.
To please me, you are ready to face this fearful ordeal.
I am.
How absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes, where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned. Men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage, of which we women know absolutely nothing.
Darling.
Darling.
Lady Bracknell!
Good heavens.
My mother.
What does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Come here. Sit down. Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young. Of physical weakness in the old. Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight, her trusty maid whose confidence I have treasured by means of a small coin. I put her at once by a luggage train. Her unhappy father is, I am glad to say, under the impression that she is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the university extension scheme on the influence of a permanent income on thought. I do not propose undeceive him. Indeed, I have never undeceived him on any question. I would consider it wrong. But of course you will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately. On this moment, on this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir! And now, as regards Algernon. Algernon!
Yes! Oh, Augusta!
May I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Oh no. Mr. Bunbury doesn't live here. Mr. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Mr. Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Yes, I came Bunbury this afternoon. I mean, poor Bunbury, he died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Oh, Mr. Bunbury? He quite exploded.
Exploded? Oh! Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I was not aware that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, he is well punished for his morbidity.
My dear Augusta, he was found out. I mean, the doctors found out that Mr. Bunbury could not live. So, Mr. Bunbury died.
He seems to have had great confidence in the opinion of his physician. I am glad, however, that he made up his mind at the last to some definite course of action and acted the proper medical advice. And now that we are finally rid of this Mr. Bunbury, may I ask, Mr. Worthing, who is this young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding in what seems to me a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I'm engaged to be married to Cecily and Algernon.
I beg your pardon.
Mr. Moncrieff and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know if there is anything peculiarly exciting in the air of this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that go on seems to me considerably above the proper average that statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. May I ask, Mr. Worthing, if Miss Cardew is at all connected with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea that there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square Southwest, Gervers Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporting Fifeshire North Bank.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They're open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
I have known strange errors in their publication.
Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messieurs Markby, and Markby.
Markby.
Markby? A firm of the very highest position in their profession. Indeed, I am told that one of the Mr. Markbys is occasionally to be seen at dinner parties. So far, I am satisfied.
Extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I have also in my possession, you'll be pleased to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the German and the English variety.
Ah, a life crowded with incident, I see. Though perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl, I am not myself in favor of premature experiences. Come, Gwendolen, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I better ask you if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, about £130,000 in the funds. That is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000, and in the funds. Miss Cardew seems a most attractive young lady, now that I look at her. Few girls of the present day have any really solid qualities, any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come here, dear. Pretty child. Your dress is sadly simple, and your hair seems almost as nature might have left it. But we can soon alter all that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a really marvelous result in a very brief space of time. I remember recommending one to young Lady Lansing, and after 3 months her own husband did not know her.
And after 6 months, nobody knew her.
Kindly turn round, sweet child. The side view is what I want. Oh, yes. Quite as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The 2 weak points in our age are its want of principle and its want of profile. The chin, a little higher, dear. Style largely depends on the way the chin is worn. They are worn very high just at present. Algernon!
Yes, Aldergast.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, prettiest, most wonderful girl in the whole world. And I don't care tuppence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Of course, you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon. But I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind. But I never dreamed for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you.
Aunt Augusta. The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I am not in favor of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent until she comes of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may almost say, an ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more can one desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew. But the fact is, I do not approve at all of his mock character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible. He is an Oxonian.
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, during a temporary absence in London on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house by means of the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, I have just been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of my Perrier Brut 89, a wine I was specially reserving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon in alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is, he was perfectly well aware from the first that I have no brother, that I never had a brother, and that I don't intend to have a brother, not even of any kind. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I decided entirely to overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
How very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Uncle Jack, I think you're being perfectly horrid.
Believe me, dear Cecily, I am acting for the best.
People always say that when they do their worst.
Child, who taught you such a pessimistic idea?
No one! If I'd been taught it, I wouldn't believe it.
Come here, sweet child. How old are you, dear?
Well, I'm really only 18. But I always admitted 20 at dinner parties.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should ever be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, it won't be long before you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. So I don't think your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray, excuse me for interrupting you again, Lady Bracknell, but it is only fair to tell you that according to the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come legally of age until she is 35.
That does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest birth who have, of their own free choice, remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton is an instance in point. To my own knowledge, she has been 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40. Oh, which was many years ago now. I see no reason why our dear Cecily should not still even be more attracted at the age you mentioned than she is at present. Oh, there will be a large accumulation of property. Oh.
Algie, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Oh, yes, I felt it instinctively. But I couldn't wait all that time. I hate waiting.
rather punctual myself. But I do like punctuality in others. And, well, waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
What is to be done then, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrieff.
My dear Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait till she is 35. A remark which I am bound to say seems to me to show a somewhat impatient nature. I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I almost gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must be quite aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, may choose for himself. Come here. We have already missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christenings? Sir, is that not somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age? The idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excesses. Lord Bracknell would be highly displeased if he learned that that was the way in which you wasted your time and money.
Am I to understand then that there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon?
I don't think that as things are now, it would be of much value to either one of us, Dr. Chasuble.
I am grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. They savor of the heretical views of the Anabaptists. Views that I have completely refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. However, compulsory christening, except among savage tribes, is, I regret to say, uncanonical. So I shall return to the Church of Mons. Indeed. I have just been informed by the pew opener that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism's been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism! Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. I'm on my way to join her.
Pray, allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may prove to be of vital importance to Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies, and a very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been, for the last 3 years, Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She's nigh.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Killen. I've been waiting for you there for an hour and 3/4.
Prism! Come here, Prism! Prism. Where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104, Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, following an elaborate investigation by the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained a manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism!
in its perambulator. And also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I had intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction that I had written during my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I can never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
Where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited that handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria, the private line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolen, wait here for me.
If you are not too long, I will wait here for you all my life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect Dr. Chasuble. I sincerely hope that nothing improbable is going to happen. The improbable is always in bad, or at any rate, questionable taste.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
That noise is extremely unpleasant.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine. Oh, yes, here is the injury it received through the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier times. Oh, here is the stale line caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage, an incident that occurred at Leamington. And here on the lock are my initials. I'd forgotten that in an extravagant mood I'd had them placed there. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I'm delighted to have it so unexpectedly restored to me. It has been a great inconvenience being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than this handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes! Mother!
Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried.
Unmarried? I do not deny this is a serious blow. But after all, who has the right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you!
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. Maternity has never been an incident in my life. The suggestion, if it were not made before such a large number of people, would be almost indelicate. There is the you really are.
Lady Bracknell. I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I am afraid that the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrieff, and consequently Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? Then I have a brother after all. I knew I had a brother. I always said I had a brother. Oh, Cecily, how could you have ever doubted that I had a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolen, my unfortunate brother. Oh, Algy, you young scoundrel, you will have to treat me with more respect in the future. You have never treated me like a brother in all of your life.
Not till today, old boy.
My own. But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you have become someone else?
Good heavens, I've quite forgotten that point.